this engineering summit, and this is a very relevant summit. So I welcome all the panelists here, present here on the dais, and well, I have been given the role of being a moderator. I also had prepared such an elaborate, talk, but then, I will be just, picking up some of the points from that and will be asking the questions from the panelists who are present here, who are also very much renowned in their own respective fields and areas. So because this is a very, very relevant topic, because engineering, we feel that itself is going through re-engineering, as we say. Because now the engineers, they are not only required to do this coding and programming thing, because this is already taken over by the artificial intelligence and the technologies. So they are doing the routine work of this coding and programming. Now our engineers have to do something more relevant these days, that they have to venture into the area of product design. Because this is industrial 4.0 not, and in which this is not the era of mass production, but this is the era of specific real-time data products which are totally designed for the customers. So this is the product design era, and the times in which we have to really go by the needs and requirements of the customers and our citizens, whether it is a government sector. So the engineers have got a new role to play. So maybe I can ask Dr. Raj Singh, who is a Vice-Chancellor of Ansal University, that how you are looking at the future, that how the engineers' roles are changing in the future.
So in fact, today's conference should be addressing the teachers of engineering colleges, which I believe hardly present. So I think it's safe to keep within the framework when I talk, so that I don't go wrong considering the audience. Thank you so much for staying back. All the audience were there. Even the lady who was comparing was a bit surprised that thank you so much staying till now, the last session. When I entered just after lunch, I think the hall was full, and slowly it's been going down. Coming to engineering education, I'm not an engineer, but yes, I have been heading engineering colleges, being part of university, or being Vice-Chancellor of universities, 4 or 5 of them. Few things I'll highlight. Between 1990s and now, so last about 20-25 years, we switched over from science to engineering. You would recall that even IITs used to call it BE, Bachelor of Engineering. And somewhere towards late 1990s, we started calling them BTech. Sometime back, about 4 or 5 years ago, I wrote on LinkedIn a post that how many people would know the difference between science, engineering, and technology. And believe me, though I get a lot of response and viewership on LinkedIn, which sometimes run to 50, 60,000, this had the most critical discussion. Students, faculty, employers, even the promoters of universities and institutions. And what conclusion I came to, that when it changed from BE to BTech, we stopped teaching engineering and we don't know how to teach technology. And we kept hanging somewhere in between. Even today, when I raise this question to some of the academia, they're absolutely not clear about what's the difference between the two. I think the session after lunch where we talked about humanities coming into it also had relevance to it. The science and the scientific theories developed to solve the problems of human beings. Engineering is application of those theories to solve the problems. And technologies which are now being developed, they are enablers to carry out those tasks in a very, very simple layman's term. I think first we need to understand the difference among these 3 terms. Going again, 1 minute I'll remain in the context. Without any offense to anybody, my request to the industry is that we should stop talking and start acting now. Believe me, in last 20 years, heading universities, whenever we approach industry, that we need this kind of help. And what we need is real-life projects and some kind of inputs in terms of designing curriculum. They say, oh yes, we'll teach this, give us so much of money. And believe me, 1 course out of 10, they'll take half of your fees. So much so that all big 4s have now an education vertical in terms of teaching. I must be anecdotal when I explain my concepts. In one university, we engaged one big 4 because the owners were very insistent, even though I was not in favor of it. And they say we'll give them to teach accounting to BCom and BBA, and then if possible, we'll make it optional to engineering in our move towards humanities. And they guaranteed 40. So all these industry partners, they'll come and say, guarantee 40, 50, 60, otherwise I'll not come less than this. So it's like, call option in finance that my risk is almost zero and the gains are unlimited in case the number of students come in there. What happened first batch, we got 32 after promising 40. Second batch, I got 12 students, and third, nobody came. Now what happened, instead of saying that the partners were not good or they could not deliver the expected deliverables, they say you were so useless that even they could not help you out. And if they had been successful, they said, you see, you were useless, and they did it, in fact. I think this role of industry has to change. And we as institutions and universities have to stop outsourcing our mainstream activities and have these partners as enablers. Have these partners as somebody who can supplement and not take over the main task. As somebody pointed out, they should be more into faculty training than directly going to the students, which they refuse most of the times. Now, the second thing, which perhaps is more regulatory, ma'am, which we, I think, have been overcoming over a period of time. Till about 5 years ago, AICT, which is an approval body, and all those 2,500 colleges which were closed down, they were AICT approved, which could not help to survive them. They said, you have a piece of land on which build a building vertical. On this side, you have a commerce school, so they should not be able to even hear their voice, so make a brick partition. Whereas, since morning, you're talking about interdisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity, which talks about horizontal connections between one discipline, other discipline. We officially stopped them from interacting with the rest of the people. I think that has led us to a weak kind of education system in engineering. And lastly, I'll need your help to understand, it may be just coincidence, there will not be any cause and effect relationships. 10 to 15 years, we have been talking about these issues of unemployability, in engineering particularly. Colleges have been closing down. This is one phenomena. Second phenomena is the mushrooming growth of coaching centers. So much so that schools do not conduct 11th and 12th classes in their premises. In Tri-City, I was there 2 years ago. For my daughter, I couldn't find a single school which was conducting regular classes for 11th or 12th. And when I talked to the regulatory authority there, they said, what can we do? They're illegal institutions. I mean, what a strange argument in this country that illegal things you can't touch, and you stifle and you strangulate the universities, ask them questions that why are you commercial? You strangulate private colleges in Delhi, you go on roads saying that cancel their registration because they increase the 5% fees, and the same evening parents giving a 4 lakh check to the coaching center. So these things have happened simultaneously. What is the reason? I do not know. So I think the blame on academics is unfair. The unemployability is not as harsh as it is projected. I think this mushrooming growth of some of these sectors is also exaggerating it. Right. And therefore, we need to really look at this.
Very right, Dr. Raj Singh. You have raised a very valid point that the role of the industry has to be discussed and debated more, and they have to be more responsible. And academia, however, is also contributing and also supporting the various ways through its own efforts. Dr. Jamshed Bharucha, you are a Vice-Chancellor of SRM. These days, we are often talking about the statement that we are teaching the students for the job and for the technology which doesn't exist in the future. So keeping this premise in mind, like how do you see yourself modifying the engineering education so that we should future-proof ourselves? Like what kind of modification do you expect in your institution or you have brought about in your institution?
Thank you. The modification I'm focused on, and the reason I came back to India to do this, is because now there is a science of learning. How does the brain learn? Okay. Very little of that has influenced the way in which we teach. I did a TEDx talk some years ago called The Dirty Little Secret About Learning. The dirty little secret about learning is that we forget. Now, many of you have BTech degrees and probably did well on some of your exams. But if I were to give you one of these exams now, most of you would fail, okay? So we go through teaching our students and then we stamp a grade, we stamp a degree. But since today most of our engineering graduates do not actually work in that field, so most of our mechanical engineering majors don't become mechanical engineers. Even our computer science majors aren't actually doing computer science. Most of them are doing computer programming, which is very little part of the actual computer science major. So most of that knowledge is forgotten. So some people would say, well, it's not what you remember about what you studied as an undergraduate. It's that you learn how to think analytically. Unfortunately, that's actually not true. So my professional field is cognitive neuroscience, and there's quite a literature now on how the brain learns and how it doesn't learn. There's actually very little transfer of analytic skills from one discipline to the other. So you couple that with this radical forgetting, and you see that we're actually doing some kind of professional education that has very little implication for one's future employment. Certainly, the point that our moderator made is exactly right. The pace of change is so fast right now. We say, okay, we need to train our students in machine learning and artificial intelligence, and all of that is true. But in 10 years and 20 years, there'll be other innovations, okay? What we need to train our students in is to have the skills to be able to learn new things. That is completely missing from our educational system. So the consensus among cognitive neuroscientists is that the most effective, enduring, and transferable form of learning is what's called active learning. We continue to engage in passive learning, where the professor stands in front of the class and lectures. It's a one-way transmission of knowledge. The students they don't actually have to study until the final exam, or maybe the midterm exam and the final exam. That's a failed model today. It was useful a long time ago, but it has completely outlived its usefulness, and it's completely ineffectual. Active learning means the student is engaged in every second in which the professor is there. Okay? And the only way to do that is to actually pose questions individually to each student.
Yes.
It's only when you ask somebody a question that their brain lights up. And so we at our university are implementing the flipped classroom. Okay? In the flipped classroom, the class time is not for the professor to tell you to transmit information. You're expected to learn that before class, in your textbook, in the readings. The class time is for the professor to interact with you, to draw you out. The most powerful form of learning is when you have to articulate verbally, orally, what you've learned, which is completely absent from our education system,
Yes.
certainly our higher education system.
Yes, Mr. Bharucha, you're
Yes.
very right,
Okay.
very right when you have said that the underlying skills we have to focus upon. We cannot just, train our students for a specific job, because these specific job might not exist in the future, but the underlying qualification of all the job would be that you have to teach problem solving, you have to teach creativity, and how to approach a solution for a problem. So this is very right, and you have been also doing some flipped classroom. You have floated some flipped classroom in your institution, and you are approaching that problem in that manner. Well, Ms. Silky Jain, you are the executive director of the Tulas group of institution. So I may say that maybe you are representing the industry. So my question to you would be like, how do you try to, what are your expectations actually from the people who have passed out from the academia, and what kind of role do you see of our future engineers?
Sure, thank you, ma'am. And I would like to thank Businessworld, first of all, for this platform, and all my co-panelists to have come together and share this. So first, I'll continue with Mr. Bharucha's flipped classroom. I appreciate this kind of a platform what you have provided in your college. But the question which is very important for me right now is that I have an almost 8 years of experience in education industry. By my education was a fashion communicator, and of course, being a business entrepreneurship, I entered into this engineering platform. So, but I am a college which is affiliated by AICTE, and nothing offending regarding AICTE, but do I or colleges which are affiliated to that platform have that kind of a power that they can do some kind of an innovation in the curriculum so that it helps the industry, it helps something better in the career of a student? But of course, the sad part is we do not have. We are still living in that guidelines given world, which is of course outdated, in spite of regular meetings where they are upgrading themselves. But as an institute, as a college affiliated by AICTE, we do not have that. So that question totally is invalid today, that are our students ready for a global challenge? Because when colleges are not giving that open platform that they can do some kind of twist and turns, then how can we actually train our students accordingly? Second problem, rightly said that, of course, students need to start doing the self-learning, which is again missing. They are dependent on the faculty to come in the classroom, learn that, and mug it at the end of the semester and vomit it out in the examination. I'm sorry to use those words, but again, are our students thinking and are they open to the idea that their bit also needs to be done? I'm sure we are not thinking that way. Because ultimately it's a blame game. Students are blaming the teachers are not doing, teachers are blaming the management is not doing, management is blaming the affiliation departments are not doing. So where is this self-motivation going to come? I think that's what we all need to think right now, that is the first thing. Now coming back to engineering, I think engineering has actually seen a lot of glorious years in past. It's seen again, when I entered the industry, I have seen much tough time, bad times as an engineer. And now I see that it's a revival time for engineering, but again, that revival time for engineering is, I again say, only for computer science or the IT branches. And that, too rightly sir said, programming languages. If I ask in the audience today, or even the faculties, anyone, or even the industry for that matter, they will only be able to tell the value-added courses from a computer background. If you talk about mechanical engineering, civil engineering, any traditional engineering which was going, nobody, I think most of the masses will not be able to tell what needs to be done, because we are only concentrating about the programming. Like you mentioned, artificial intelligence, or any second kind of how many, I can't name what to do in a mechanical engineer running an institute. I can't do that until I go and do my research, because there are no vendors, there's no proper curriculum divided to that. The third, of course, challenge is the revival of the core branches, but along with that, when we talk about the global standards which a student should be trained to, I think communication plays a very, very, very important role. Today, 65% of, or maybe more, our students are from the rural background. And even by rural background, I also mean tier 2 cities, for that matter. Forget about the villages and any other part of the country. The schooling has no mandates in terms of English as a communication. The college as a syllabus has no mandate as a communication. And as a college, if we want to put English as a communication as a mandate, there is no parameters adjusted with that we can put a check mark, because there is no compulsory subject. Then how will a student study? Because again, he wants to just complete his 5 subjects, attain the passing marks, and become an engineer. So I think all these points really need to be discussed, and a consortium needs to be designed wherein a college representative, a school representative, industry representative, of course, the AICTE and the UGC should be a part of it, and together we need to do something Because until we do a step together, nothing will change. We'll all keep just discussing, and this kind of platforms will keep going on.
Yes, Silky Jain, you have raised a very important, significant point that these days engineers, they should have the proper communication skills as well. And also, gone are the days when they were used to do coding or programming, but now they have to come out and they have to be in the forefront, and they have to take a lead in and know various kind of teamwork and collaborations also. So in the light of this only, what Silky Jain has said, I would just like to move this panel discussion ahead and would ask from Subhrangshu Neogi, who is a business leader of UPES University. That's like, these days we are even, having the innovation labs. And we are also giving some extra skills to our engineering students that they should know how to work in a team and how to collaborate with the various diverse groups, because innovation plays a very key role. So, like in the light of this, like we are also teaching the entrepreneurship skills to our students. So how do you think that can the entrepreneurship skills can be taught to the engineering students? And also, can you please also speak something about communication skills also, which we need to, teach to our engineering students, which we were not doing it previously?
Sure, thanks. So thanks for having me over Businessworld. I think I was supposed to be, no, I have a mic. I was supposed to be in the previous panel. I was on a call, unfortunately missed that. So by default, I've landed up on the last panel. It's unfortunate that the house is depleting, as Dr. Raj Singh said, very fast. But I think just a caveat before I start, I'm neither an academician, nor I'm a doctorate, nor I'm an engineer. So I hopefully bring a little bit of a different perspective, being fortunate enough to be on the corporate side for more than 20 years, and my last assignment was with UPES in the education domain. So hopefully I would be able to bring in a different perspective. But I think by and large, my submission to everybody here is, to all institutions, and what I've also seen in my educational avatar is that, people from a student outcome perspective largely focus on making students career ready and job ready. I think we need to move away from that mindset, from just making them either job ready or career ready. We need to make them life ready, which is where things like, holistic learning, things like communication, things like being ready for life at large needs to come through. Because I think the context to that is very clear. If you go out and step out in the industry, I'm sure all of us do, the working life has become very non-linear. Gone are the days. I was addressing a young batch of students, coincidentally, about a week back, when I told them that, when we graduated from B school 25 years ago, it was a very linear path. Management trainee, assistant manager, blah, blah, blah. And eventually you kind of rise up the corporate ladder, through your own merit and qualifications. But now it's become non-linear. You may become a CEO after 4 years of your work ex. You may get into entrepreneurship. You may get into totally unrelated, economies. So for that, it's very important to have a well-rounded personality and, well-rounded sort of a TNL outcome at institutions, teaching and learning outcomes at institutions. And I think the other trend which is shaping up, big time, when we see life around us, which is only more of a sort of a Silicon Valley, phenomena, is that we are getting into a gig economy. Do people know what a gig economy is? So gig economy, yes, sir. So I'm sure you do. But, basically a gig economy is when you kind of get into short-term projects, which are quasi-entrepreneurial or entrepreneurial. So it's a very non-linear sort of a career path that you follow. And it's becoming very commonplace today. So when we were talking, as Dr. Raj said, that, people earlier were expected to only code. Today, coding has become absolutely a hygiene. It's about advanced skills. It's about those learning, new skills, new technologies, emerging technologies, how you're able to contribute to business, success. Because even a tech person, when we are talking about engineering specifically, even a tech person is no longer, or CTO. Look at the role of a CIO or a CTO today, the way it's changing in corporations. It's becoming a business leadership role. You're collaborating with the other C-suite partners to ensure that the business is successful. It's not just about your own domain. So I think the foundation of all this is basically your years in the institution. And while we've spoken about, this VUCA world and gig economy and all of that, since we're running short of time, what is the solution? I think the previous panel also alluded to this. The industry and the academia, I think we're all talking about that. And as Sir said, it's time to act. And that's very true, because ultimately academics is the wealth of intellectual capital, by and large. I'm not generalizing, but academic is intellectual capital, and corporate, or the sort of corporate side, or the industry is basically financial capital and business problems. So how do you really bridge this journey from having intellectual capital and financial capital and problems which need to be solved? I think the solution to that is obviously close working relationship, but the big thing is empathy. Today, business leaders don't empathize with academics. Academics, unfortunately, it's sad, but it's true. I've been on both sides of the table, so I can see, I can profess and say it with some degree of confidence, I would say. It may be controversial, but probably there is lack of empathy on either side. I think you need to understand both sides of the table, work collaboratively. I think one of the points which one of my co-panelists mentioned, that it's become very transactional. People come and create co-branded courses, but ultimately the game is about revenue sharing. I don't know if some of those big boys in the game are here in the hall, but unfortunately it's sad, but it's true. They have an academic, a vertical head responsible for talking to higher education institutions, colleges and universities, and they have a target. That, boss, this is your target for the year, go out there, get me a revenue of X 100 crores from the top 50 universities. Once the top 50 universities are covered, look at the next 25, look at the next 30, have a suite of 100 universities. It's very transactional. Yes, somewhere commerce has to dominate, or commerce has to, I won't say dominate, but commerce has to, kind of guide us. But ultimately, you also need to have a non-transactional, deeper relationship, right? Which I think will only come when you're engaged at a very, very deep level. So I was just thinking through this while we were, on the panel, that what are the various ways in which you can collaborate? I mean, today, from an academics perspective or from a institution's perspective, it's about student outcomes. Because if I work with XYZ, ABC, ultimately, placement should happen, right? Or the industry should come and help me co-create courses, which happens. But what beyond that? I think the working relationship needs to get far more immersive, right? You need to look at a multidisciplinary sort of a, fabric of learning, right? I mean, we were fortunate. When I say we, I mean, it's my previous assignment, but at UPES, I think, and some of you also have that, we have the School of Design and the School of Engineering co-located. So I think that was a unique scenario where students actually were bang in the middle of a School of Design and Engineering together, working together on multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary projects. But that also means that, regulatory perspectives also need to be looked at, right? And I think the other thing is that, industry has a lot of needs. For instance, today, if a corporate has a need of thought leadership, which is a big need for every corporate, every industry, I think they can really work closely with academic institutions to ensure that their thought leadership goals are met. Because intellectual capital resides in institutions. I mean, sir, you've been in the US, right? I mean, that's what you mentioned. I mean, today, if you look at US, all the big boys there were incubated in the large universities. Universities and academics leads, corporate follows. Unfortunately, we need to see more of that happen in India. It's probably the other way around. Industry leads, academics follows. I'm sorry if I'm being controversial here, but it's sad, but it's true. So I think the onus is on us as an ecosystem to ensure that we work collaboratively with corporates, with the industry, and vice versa, to create an ecosystem which is based on, cultivating a culture of superlative student outcomes, cohesive learning, new skills, and somewhere where students are actually trained and geared to meet, challenges of life at large, as opposed to just getting their first job and first career.
Actually, yes, you have given a very useful insight into all the aspects and also the sides of the industrialists and all academia, and also because you have been on both the sides of the table. So we have got a very good insight from you. Yeah. Okay. All right. Actually, one valid point which arises out of this panel discussion was that I just wanted my panelists to just comment about, few seconds on the research, on the importance and significance of the research and development. Yeah. Because this is, I think, very relevant these days when emerging technologies are coming, and also when the data is so much prevalent, the real-time data is so much available, and also the consumer needs are so much ambitious. And so can you just comment for 2 seconds or each one of you, about the need of the product design and research and development? Because I think that is quite relevant.
Start with me?
Yeah, you
okay.
can just start.
30 seconds, I'll respond to what Silky said. Yes. Today, in fact, we cannot blame the regulatory bodies. For the first time in the history of education in this country, regulatory bodies are ahead of us. Earlier we used to say, what do we do because they don't allow us? Now we say, what can we do? They're much ahead of us. So we always keep on blaming. It's the teacher in the classroom who has to perform. Believe me, AICT, UGC or any regulatory body that doesn't talk about the pedagogy. They don't talk about how do you teach. It's only up to the teacher. So you can innovate as much as you can without caring for this. In fact, AICT chairman goes on record saying that please push students outside the classroom, make them work on the field work kind of things. And then of course, as Professor said, ultimate answer lies in the outcome-based education, where you need to take it from knowledge to understanding to creation. I think that's when we move from knowledge to creation, a lot of research is involved in between. The data, the information available with you, the projects available with you. I think you need to expand first the learning opportunities and convert them into learning outcomes. In India, if at all we talk about research, it has been only at the PG level. I think we need to bring it to the graduation level. By the way, the new education policy, some of you must have gone through, talks about mandatory research at undergraduate level. It's a dream education policy. If you all can read it and see that it doesn't change much in the final draft, this will be the best thing for this country, in fact.
Dr. Bharucha, if you can comment on the research, the need of product design and research and development.
Yeah, I mean, all research and development in India needs to be accelerated by a huge amount. India today has the brains, it has the knowledge, and it has the money. So we can no longer say, oh, we cannot do it because we're India. We are now a superpower. We are growing faster than any other economy, but our research, frankly, is pathetic. And it's mostly Me Too research. Very little original ideas coming out, and that's because of a strong cultural tendency, not as much in the big metro cities, but definitely out through most of the country, where students are not encouraged to challenge orthodoxy. They're not encouraged to take on their teachers. They're not encouraged to come up with new ideas. Even when IIT PhDs are interviewed for faculty positions at Indian universities, I've witnessed that. They are discouraged by the panelists, the expert panelists, from presenting new ideas. They're literally humiliated and slapped down. Don't you know, didn't you take a course? That's not how it is. So there isn't a culture from the very beginning of taking intellectual risks until parents, teachers at all levels encourage their students to go for it. Make mistakes. You never learn without making mistakes. Try out new ideas. If they fail, you're never an entrepreneur until you've failed many times. That kind of confidence is needed in order for India to be truly innovating new products instead of just copying the products that were developed elsewhere.
Silky, Jain, if you could comment on this.
Yeah, so I think research is the utmost thing which is unending, and it should be there always. And I think, but we should also start telling the students how to research. That is the biggest question, because I think people do not know how to do it. So I think the first step should be that how to identify the problem, because there lies a solution. So there should be mind mapping sessions, I feel, wherein they should be actually given free time just to identify a problem might be of their routine life. So where the innovation will actually come. And the second big thing, because sir is sitting here, I think in US or UK or any other country, I think whenever there is a new thing which is told by a student, so the question is what? In India, whenever a new problem or something a kid would want to do, we would ask the question why.
Yeah.
So this question of why should be obsoleted from the dictionaries or the communication. The question should be, let's do it. So until the failure becomes the utmost thing, as in that it should not be coming with the fear of failures. So of course we can do research.
Mr. Neogi, if you would comment on
Yeah,
research and
so,
development.
I think very well summarized by everyone. So, my view, and I think everybody would agree, that India is largely is a society which replicates very well. Unfortunately, originality of ideas is easier said than done. It actually, the genesis is schooling, college, and then higher ed. So I think the culture of questioning, the culture of the way we are taught in the classrooms, and that whole DNA and ecosystem which fosters originality of thinking, immersive learning, and the outcome is research and development needs to start. Because why can't we get, it's a billion plus people, right? Why can't we get a Airbnb out of India? Why can't we get a Uber out of India? I mean, we've had fantastic models which are being replicated, but where is that original idea? I mean, today, whatever said and done, with all due regards to Niti Aayog and the government, I think the startup ecosystem is extremely vibrant, probably the most vibrant ecosystem after Silicon Valley and China tech. But fact is, where are the original ideas? And I think the hotbed of originality and ideas and innovation are higher education institutions. And it starts from schooling, college, and then higher ed. So I think that ecosystem collectively in the whole education value chain needs to start.
So I think so we will wind up the panel discussion that of the future skills which are required by our engineers in the times to come, and we had a very fruitful panel discussion in which we highlighted various aspects from the academia, also from the industry, and also from the person, Mr. Neogi, who had just commented upon both the sides, industry as well as academic. One of the points which we had highlighted here in this panel discussion was about, the guidelines should be more clear. Guidelines should be more clear by AICTU, and the government should come out with more and more adaptive guidelines, and I think the inputs which are out of this session or out of this conference will be submitted to the government for some insights, useful insights, and it will be taken into consideration while formulation of any kind of policy matters. So this is a very useful information, and of course we have also dwelt at length upon the kind of skills which is required by our students today. Not only they should learn about the problem solving, but also they should, there is no problem if they fail to do anything. It's okay. Failing is also okay.
Absolutely.
To achieve success, we have to really fail. And so this is how we are going to do our research and development. And this is how we are going to approach a solution or a problem. So therefore, we should stop asking why, but we should see, how it should be solved. This was a very relevant point. And at the same time, we had just come about that this research now should not only be undertaken during our PhD level or where we are doing some doctorate, but research should start from the school level, as you have raised the point. That's from schooling only the research should start. It should be a very useful, academia syllabus which should be formed right at the outset when a child is studying or obtaining an education in the school, and then it should be followed at the college level and also at the further higher education level. So research is a very, very important component. He should know how to problem solve and how to do the creative thinking. So this was also a very good kind of a panel discussion, and we are I think if there are any discussion, if there are any thoughts from the audience, our panelists would like to take it.